Is running bad for your knees or actually good? This was a video that popped up on my YouTube feed from Talking with Docs, and it was really interesting. And there was some points that they made that I really strongly agree with that I want to highlight. Some stuff that they said that I think was maybe not quite right. And there was a couple of things that I thought were really not what I would suggest at all. And so I just want to go through this video today and see if I can offer my own perspective as a running coach and a physical therapist for like 20 years who specializes exclusively in helping injured runners, many of whom have arthritis. And I want to go through this video today and share my perspective on what they said. All right, first up, let's let them set the stage a little bit.
Right. And what we're learning is that just like bone, cartilage that has micro trauma from activities of your daily living as well as exercise kind of turns over. So there are chondrocytes that make the cartilage and help repair the cartilage, and a cell called a chondroclast that kind of helps resorb some of it. And just like the Wolff's law of bone, which you love, Paul loves all the physics.
The more you load bone, the more bone you get.
We're learning that the more that you load and use cartilage to a point that this is actually good for it. The use it or use it philosophy for cartilage also applies, and that our bodies repair that damage. One of the issues with cartilage.
It's great that they're highlighting this, right? All living tissues adapt to the stress placed on them, including cartilage. So cartilage is I liken it to a kind of marbly-like structure, although it's not. But if you imagine like a smooth, hard surface that lines the bone, so in this case, the knee joint, but mostly talking about the hips as well. And that cartilage is a living tissue, and it can adapt to the stress placed on it. It can become stronger, more resilient, thicker, or it can break down and become deconditioned and degenerative over time. And this is what they're referencing. We used to think it always went one way. It just, you had what you had, and it would just degenerate over time. But that's not the case. It can adapt to the stresses placed on it, just like a muscle or a tendon or a bone. These things get stronger if they are loaded appropriately.
Cartilage that's unique, though, is the blood supply, Paul. Can you help people understand why the blood supply to cartilage is not straightforward?
Cartilage doesn't have a great blood supply. That's the bottom line. Cartilage gets most of its nutrients from the synovial fluid, or the fluid that's inside the joint. That's where it gets most of its blood supply. Maybe at the very edge where the cartilage is attached to the bone, there's a little bit of blood there, but most of your nutrients come from the synovial fluid. Not a great blood supply.
Can we just not put in?
Which is spot on, right? So cartilage doesn't adapt as readily as something like a muscle, right? You start loading your muscles heavy, you can actually see physical changes within them in a matter of weeks. Like cartilage is way more difficult to get it to respond and adapt for many of the reasons that the guys talk about here. And now they're going to talk a little bit about arthritis.
Recent studies have shown that running does not directly cause arthritis of your knees.
Okay, Forrest Gump, tell me something though.
Yes.
If I have arthritis in my knees already, is running.
So this is great. They're highlighting the research that has shown that there is not a direct correlation between running and the development of arthritis. So over the last few decades, there has been lots of research into this, so much so that there are now multiple systematic reviews and meta-analyses to try and analyze the results from all of the different studies and determine, is there a link between running and arthritis? And they are coming out all the time. I just was looking when I was prepping this episode, and I found another one today, and they're all finding the same thing, that they can't see a direct relationship between running and the development of arthritis. So if we look at this one here from 2017, and it concludes recreational runners had a lower occurrence of OA compared with competitive runners and controls. We have this one here from 2023 from Burfield and Berman and Sayers. We actually had these guys on the podcast a little while ago, and they were looking at, okay, but does more running cause more arthritis? Like they were looking for a relationship between how much running you're doing and the degeneration of knees. And they found the same thing. There's no causal relationship or no relationship that they could find between people who run more and develop more knee arthritis. So like I said, we had Dr. Miles Burfield and Dr. Robert Berman on the podcast a little while back to talk about that research and their thoughts about it. So I'll leave a link to that in the description. And like I said, more research coming about this all the time. So I just found this one this morning from 2024, and that they did a survey and they looked at people running, I think it was the Chicago Marathon, and they found that they identified no association between the cumulative running history and the risk for arthritis. So this is very much in keeping with the trend in all of this research, is that there doesn't seem to be a strong correlation. So or any significant relationship between arthritis and running. So far, we're very much on the same page. This next bit is where we start to disagree just a little bit.
Running going to make it worse?
So they've done studies, and we'll link some of these studies in the description, and they have studied this as well. And no, there's not conclusive evidence that if you have arthritis and you run to a limit, that it's not going to make it worse. And they've even looked at half marathoners, even ultra marathoners. So people that are doing like very, very long distances, that this is not correlated with causing arthritis. What I would say though, is that if say you have a post-traumatic arthritis.
Okay.
So you have a joint surface that's irregular from a fracture. So an incongruent joint, and then you run on that joint. I think they haven't done specific studies on this group because it would be hard to kind of control. But I think it's intuitive that if you have an abnormal joint structurally, that if you run on it and have repetitive impact, that could lead to more progressive arthritis.
Maybe, we don't know. But I think this is quite important to point out. And he does say that, this is his perspective, and he does qualify that there hasn't been specific research on this. But I think this is quite important because it sort of assumes that running must be bad and that, or bad for your joints, and that these other runners were surprised that they're getting away with it. Instead of looking at it as, running, people who are runners run a lot, and that has a massive positive impact on their physical, mental, and social well-being. And this helps protect them against arthritis as well as a bajillion other things, right? So this perspective that because there was some trauma, and that whenever you have trauma to a joint, like if you have a fracture, or the more common one that I see is that runners, particularly women, right? Because the rate of ACL injury in women is quite a bit higher than men, and women's participation in school sports and collegiate sports went up massively in the last 30, 40 years. So now what we've seen, or what I see a lot, is a lot of women in their 30s, 40s who tore their ACL and or their meniscus when they were playing volleyball or soccer or something at school. And then most of us, they get more into running as they age, not because they like it more than those other sports. It's just more convenient, right? So they take up running, but then they have knee pain and that kind of stuff. And then it's assumed that because they had the injury, right? When you have a significant traumatic injury like that, or a fracture, which the doctor is talking about here, then you are at higher risk for arthritis. And what he's saying is that if you were then to run on it, that would increase your risk for arthritis. But what I'm saying is that we don't have any evidence of that we've seen. And we have lots of evidence that says people who run don't get arthritis. In fact, they seem to get it less than other people. So I don't think we should presume that, because this isn't a net zero, right? This is, if you were to take someone and say, okay, like one of these women that I was just mentioning, and say you can't run, it's not like they're going to then just substitute, 3 or 4 hours of running per week with 3 or 4 hours of swimming or biking, okay? The reality is that most people who take up running, if they stop running, or if they're advised or told to stop running, which they often are, they won't do as much. They'll do a lot less. They'll often do nothing, right? And this is because running is incredibly convenient. And if you like running like I do, a lot of people who like running don't like those other things, and they don't want to do them, and they don't do them as much. So the negative effects of not running aren't just that you're not running, it's that you're not exercising a lot of the time, right? And if you look at the risk factors for the development of arthritis, it's things like high BMI, low activity levels, other blood markers related to obesity and this kind of stuff. And those things are all made worse by not exercising, right? I wouldn't agree with this assessment. I don't necessarily think that it's intuitive, or it's that something we should presume that if you have some sort of traumatic injury when you're younger, let's say a fracture around your knee, or an ACL tear or a meniscus tear, that you should then avoid running and do something else. You could consider it, but if you find running to be the most enjoyable thing and that keeps you the most active, I would argue that in the absence of evidence that says that running accelerates arthritis, we should keep running. We should keep doing it because of all the positive benefits that are associated with it. Now, in this next section, they go through their advice for runners who have arthritis or who are worried about arthritis. And I agree with pretty much all of it, except I think that they prioritize the wrong things. Now would essentially flip it. So let's get into that a little bit.
So if you like to run, keep running. Don't necessarily worry about your arthritis progressing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
If you have arthritis and you like to run, you can still keep running within the limits of your pain.
Okay, Janae, let's give them 5 tips.
Okay.
5 tips that if you're going to go running, do these 5 things that might minimize the discomfort that you're having while you're running, if you do have some underlying arthritis in your knee.
So Paul and I both like to run. And the one thing that I've learned recently, so my number one thing is get proper shoes.
I strongly disagree with this. Not that having proper shoes is bad in any way, but the evidence that connects any kind of pain or disability or pathology to shoe selection is, as far as I'm aware, pretty much non-existent, right? It's really weak. So saying that the shoes are the most important thing that we should think about, I would definitely not agree with in terms of priority. I wouldn't say that it's not important at all, but I wouldn't say that getting the right shoes is going to significantly protect you from getting knee pain and or furthering knee arthritis if you're a runner.
Really did not appreciate the evolution of running shoe technology as far as the amount of cushion that you have, as well as going somewhere that actually knows how to measure your foot, see if you're a pronator or a supinator, to give a shoe that kind of facilitates your gait pattern in a way that helps balance the load to your knee.
Chuck Taylor high tops look good, but they're not the best for running.
Okay, so get good shoes. That's our number one.
Surfaces. What are you running on? That makes a difference, right? Because if you run on a very hard surface like the concrete sidewalk, then that force of impact is going to be translated through your shoe, your good shoe, but still to your joints.
Right.
I would disagree with this one too. And this is mostly because when you run on a softer surface, so let's exaggerate and say sand, you will tighten your muscles to stiffen your leg. When you run on a harder surface like concrete or asphalt, you will soften your muscles, right, to adjust. So essentially the stiffness in your leg is adjusted depending on the surface. So the softer the surface, the softer the cushioning in your shoes, the more stiffness you'll generate with your muscles. And the harder the surface, the softer you'll make your muscles, essentially cushioning that impact via your muscles. So the net sort of impact going through the joints is fairly similar. And just from a practical standpoint, trying to find soft surfaces to run on all the time, because running is such a lifestyle choice for people in terms of their health from the convenience standpoint, right? Most of us don't, or we would find it hard to only run on soft surfaces, right? So restricting people or making people think that running on hard surfaces is bad for their knees or it causes arthritis, I don't agree with. I haven't seen any evidence that suggests that. When you run on softer surfaces, you'll stiffen your legs anyway with your muscles. So I would say run on the surfaces that are more convenient for you, that allow you to do it, unless you notice any significant association with your pain. So if you notice that whenever you run on hard surfaces, it is more painful for you, then 1, run on softer surfaces temporarily to allow you to keep running, but 2, address the reasons, the insufficiencies in your strength, in your biomechanics, in your resilience, so that you can run on harder surfaces.
Whereas if you run on something softer, like a treadmill, even
grass, trail.
Yeah, the trails. I
like the trails.
I love running. I mean, look, I don't like running.
I would agree, though, that if you have the option to run on trails more frequently, not so much because it's softer, but because the surface is not even. One of the problems with running that does mean that it causes more repetitive stress injuries is because it's such a repetitive activity that the stress sort of builds up in specific spots. Whereas if you can alternate your shoes from one run to the next, change the surface, change the route, change the side of the road that you run on, it makes the whole activity a little bit less repetitive because the stresses are falling in slightly different places. So adding in trail running to have more variety and unevenness in the surface that you're running on, I think is a good thing.
But I run. Yeah. I don't like running, but if I must run, I prefer to run on the trails.
Okay.
And that's where I usually try to run, which gets tricky in the winter.
So you're not like Seinfeld, I choose not to run.
Why? I'll tell you why. Because I choose not to run.
No, I do run, but I don't love it. Okay. I don't wake up in the morning, oh, I can't do my run today. I'm not one of those at all. But when I run, I like to run on trails. I don't run very long.
So surface, so softer surface. Number 3 is having proper technique. So this is kind of hard, but I think if you're going to run more significant distances, I would say look into taking, not only to be more efficient and to become a better runner, but you don't want to be loading your joints in an abnormal way. They say try to reduce the amount of up and down motion. So you don't want to kind of be bouncing along because the amount of impact is higher. And also, as you increase in speed, people tend to have bigger steps. You actually don't want to do that because, again, the force is going to be a lot higher. So take smaller steps, like work on faster foot turn.
I would agree with that for the most part. When we are running, if we run with quote unquote better technique, then we can distribute the forces that we experience more evenly, right? And one of the things that he's talking about is taking smaller steps or increasing your step rate, your cadence, which does seem to be a helpful thing in terms of reducing stress, particularly in the knee. So that's generally speaking, a good thing to do. I wouldn't say it's as important as some of the other things we're going to come back to in a sec.
Turnover.
I just thought it was trying to look cool. Run the way it looks cool.
Yeah, not like Phoebe.
Come on, let's start running. Let's go.
A rather wide step width for Phoebe there. Possibly overstriding a little bit.
No, not like Phoebe. More like Tom Cruise.
Yes.
And he's in his 60s.
He always
still looks cool,
karate chops the air. It makes you look faster.
He looks fast.
Can't argue with that. I can't see any overstriding whatsoever from Tom there, so that looks great.
Yeah, he does look fast.
Cool. So did Steve Austin. Really cool and slow-mo.
That's right. Okay, number 4
is train.
Okay.
Whenever you're going to do any sport, you need to do some training around it. Okay.
Right.
So train around running, right? It's not just running. If you're gonna run, you also want to do some leg strengthening exercises.
Yep.
And just general conditioning exercises to get you ready for your...
So 100% agree here. And this is where we start to line up. So I think I would have put this first and these other things lower down the list. And I would say that if you have arthritis, if you're worried about arthritis, if you want to set yourself up to be running for the rest of your life, then strength training is arguably the best intervention you have at your disposal, and specifically making your legs stronger, which is different from strength training, because a lot of the time in runners, we see strength training that is not actually making people stronger. They're doing climbs, bridges, band exercises that are very light that they could do hundreds of reps of if they wanted to. These are not making them significantly stronger. So what we really want to be looking at is strength training that actually makes you stronger. This is moving a kind of weight, whether you're doing a step up or a lunge or a squat or a deadlift or a single leg deadlift or a calf raise. You want the weight to be so heavy if you can do more than 8 reps without really struggling, more weight. So that's the difference that I would say here, is that the priority should be strengthening your muscles to help protect your joints. And the emphasis should be on making the muscles stronger by making sure that the exercises are hard enough.
Considering other sports, maybe some running and some swimming, and also working on flexibility and mobility, especially as a couple like slightly older guys. You definitely have to work on the flexibility and the mobility. And my last one,
I almost get my thumb to my wrist.
That's good. The last one is when you're increasing your mileage. So say you are training for a race, be sensible and don't increase your mileage very quickly. They say about 10% a week would be the max. So don't say, hey, I'm going to run a marathon, all of a sudden run 60 miles in your first week. It's too much. You increase your chances of injury. So all these are really designed to reduce.
Don't Forrest Gump this one.
So this is why I put resilience at the bottom of our 3 critical components pyramid. So resilience is the ability of your joint surfaces, the cartilage, the bones, the ligaments, the tendons, the muscles, all of these different tissues. The resilience is their ability to tolerate the impact stress of running. The higher the resilience, the more of those impact cycles they can tolerate without having pain, sensitivity, or degeneration and breakdown. And resilience is the biggest component for me, right? That's why it's at the base of the pyramid, because the way that your body adapts to and responds to the running that you do is the primary determinant in my mind of whether you will develop pain, pathology, arthritis, anything like that. So it's all about structuring your running dosage across the week, across the month, across the quarter, across the year, to keep you in the adaptive zone. Not too much, not too little, not so little that you're deconditioning, not so much that you're overloading something like the knee and causing pain and degeneration. Getting that balance in your running training right is the most important thing. The second most important thing being that the muscles that surround the joint are strong enough to support it and offload the joints. That's the second most important thing. And the third most important thing would be the form, the biomechanics, the way you're moving, and the shoe selection and how that influences your technique. So these would be the top three things that I would focus on. So essentially looking at the list that the guys have shared here in reverse order, where the running progression, the training for the running is the most important. The second most important thing is making sure that your muscles are very, very strong. The third most important, making sure that you have the correct form or good biomechanics. And then other things would be coming later than that and far, far less important. But aside from the slight disagreement on whether a traumatic injury plus running is a bad idea, which I would disagree and say that it isn't. Certainly it shouldn't be presumed to be. We would disagree there. And also in terms of the advice that they give based on the evidence, I would sort of flip it and say that the priorities need to be more around the resilience, then the strength, then the form, and then anything else. It's great to see a video from these guys who are very, very popular on YouTube. I must confess they are new to me. This is the first video I'd seen with them. It was really good. They obviously know what they're talking about, and they are sharing the message and getting a research-based perspective out there that running is not bad for your knees. We know this from the evidence, and we are working in an environment, and they even talk about this later in the episode, where doctors, particularly surgeons, are advising runners to stop running because it's bad for their knees, in spite of the gigantic amount of evidence we have to the contrary. So it's really good to see these guys sharing that message. And I really appreciate them giving a voice to this message, because literally not a day goes by that I don't talk to a runner who has been told that they should stop running because it's bad for their knees. Like, I mean, maybe an exaggeration, definitely not a week. I've talked to at least 3 or 4 runners this week who are told often by multiple doctors and surgeons to stop running because it's bad for their knees. But we just don't have any evidence of that. And the evidence says that running is extremely good for your health. It's probably not bad for your knees, and it's probably actually quite good for your knees, right? So let's focus on that. That's the big takeaway. So thank you to Talking with Docs for letting me use this episode. This video. I'll put a link in the description to the original video if you want to go and check that out as well. That would be great.